Hello, role-playing people, and in this episode we're going to check out some of the signature characters of Demon the Fallen. It needs to be mentioned, some of these characters also appear in the core book or in other supplements and might still fulfill important roles within the factions and the setting of the game, while others only appear in the fiction of Demon, either in the novel trilogy or in the anthology of short stories. There are many awesome characters that I didn't include here because we either don't have enough details on them or because they aren't treated as signature characters, but they are very interesting nonetheless. Without further ado, let's present some protagonists. Gaviel. The devil Gaviel, known as the Throne of the Summer Sun, currently resides within the body of Noah Wallace, son of the televangelist Matthew Wallace. Noah's father forced him to go to church and do missionary service as a young man, even though his heart just wasn't into that kind of thing. The rupture in their relationship widened when Noah caught his father having sex with the choir director, an affair that had been going on for years. During one particularly nasty argument with Matthew, the son called him a con artist and left home since he had just received a full scholarship from university and no longer had to rely on his father for financial support. Still, he couldn't keep from watching his father's show on TV. Gaviel entered the scene when Noah was hit by a speeding vehicle near the college campus. As he lay there dying, the devil simply took over. The host's soul, though very weakened, isn't actually gone and comes to Gaviel in his dreams, though Gaviel does his best to ignore it, accusing Noah and reminding him of his sins. This devil is a ruthless manipulator who uses every single facial expression, word, or gesture as a weapon. As a matter of fact, he only makes facial expressions when interacting with others, using them in a perfectly calculated way to get what he wants. He never emotes when he isn't observed by someone. In the novels, he sets a church on fire, intentionally making everyone believe it was all a tragic accident, just so he can save someone from inside and be regarded as a hero by the community, making a name for himself, attracting more followers. So you know, this is the same character who is recounting the celestial events to Reverend Matthew Wallace in the introductory fiction for the Demon core book, and in light of his portrayal in the novels, I don't think this individual should be trusted one bit, because he is one lying, abusive, blackmailing, sneaky devil. In a fight with Usiel, in a fantastic show of manipulation, he relinquishes control of the host body back to Noah, who is extremely weakened but alive somewhere in the back of Gaviel's mind, and throws the Slayer off to keep him from dealing a potential death blow. It works, but Noah's soul is gone after this event. He no longer comes to Gaviel in his dreams and no longer has any influence on him. A little later, we'll see exactly how this devil's story ends. Next, Arimal. He was a fiend of little importance, a student of the spheres who foresaw a great cosmic cataclysm in the time before the rebellion. This worried and disturbed Arimal, so he brought his concerns to the attention of the masters of his house, but they simply told him, "All is well, don't worry about it, go about your own business." They told him what looks like a cataclysm is actually an event that will balance itself out in the grand scheme of things and will lead to a good outcome in the future. Unable to just accept and reconcile with that answer, he decided to bring this to the attention of certain members of the other houses. So in a way, even though Lucifer inspired and led the rebellion, the whole situation was caused by Ahrimal's premonition, his concern, and subsequent disobedience. He was told to leave it be, and he didn't. But while this might make him look like a fool, he is far from being one. The Council of Fates foresaw the murder of Adam, and yet, as they read the threads of this tragedy further, they noticed it leads to a lot of loyalist casualties during a future siege unlike anything they had seen before. Thinking this might be the push that wins them the whole war, the rebel fates allowed the murder to happen, gazing upon it in horror. Arimal alone tried to stop it against all agreements and orders, but he arrived too late and also became a mere spectator of Cain's deed. That great siege that the seers had spoken of was the Siege of Sagun, one of the most horrifying slaughters in demon history, and far from being the siege that wins the war. But that is a story for another time. Currently, Ahrimal is in the body of a Polizeikommissar with a shady past, Gerhard Liebner from Berlin. Though his legal jurisdiction is non-existent outside Germany, the Fiend is very well connected and has access to some very sensitive information on a worldwide scale. Supposedly on extended medical leave after a very difficult case which took a toll on his mental health, Liebner travels all the time, looking into whatever he finds interesting while being bankrolled by the Cryptics or whoever employs his service as detective. He is the head of his faction, not because he's a good leader who rose to prominence despite adversity, but because he has zero interest in leading. He doesn't give orders, he doesn't have any plans, hell, he doesn't even know who the librarians are. So he is almost completely absent from all faction matters, but his skill and curiosity make him an inspiration to all cryptics worldwide. He believes they are the only faction with an actual grip on reality, and mapping out the current state of the world is the best thing to do. All of the heavy lifting of leadership was left to his second-in-command, Guy Pontel. This individual is responsible for planning and collecting the names that make up the Celestinomicon and Crucianomicon. Meanwhile, Arimal is just doing his own thing. Next, Sabriel. Once an angel of the Eastern Sea and a Fell Knight of the Iron Legion, humanity's loyal shield, Sabriel is currently inhabiting the body of one Christina Vadrudakis. She deeply detests and adores the world at the same time, treating it as a very dangerous playground, but a playground nonetheless. She detests the human food she must consume to stay alive. She detests all things humankind has done artistically as a cheap imitation of the celestial beauty her house produced. She hates having sex with her multiple partners, and yet she kind of enjoys all of these at the same time. Sabriel is a succubus, a playful, frequently vengeful, and quite cruel object of everyone's desire. Christina, the host body's previous owner, had been in a deeply abusive marriage which led to a miscarriage and suicide. Nowadays, Sabriel frequently enjoys playfully wearing the mask of the abuser, hurting others just because she can and because maybe it'll teach them more about themselves, teach them a lesson. She is a masterful shapeshifter whose abilities of deception are probably unmatched, even though she can be very honest when attempting to make a genuine connection with someone. One of her most memorable tricks, which she performed with the aid of Gaviel, was fooling one of her thralls, Tommy, that he had found out her true name and that she was under his complete control. Of course, this was all bogus. The ritual Tommy performed was just a show, and she orchestrated the whole thing so that any fallen reading her servant's mind would be under the false impression that they have uncovered her true name. Worked like a charm, but what is truly impressive is how she played along and manipulated her thrall into genuinely believing he had complete power over her, while she actually remained in control the whole time. And though it might not look like it, with her seeming to be tempestuous and fickle, Sabriel is very calculated, especially in her activity as a succubus, as an entity who makes pacts by offering sexual gratification and embodying others' fantasies. Sabriel never makes a show of her virtues, but she still has them. When the opportunity arises, she stops herself from cannibalizing another soul, even though the temptation is there. At the end of the events presented in the books, she releases her thrall, Tommy, from the pact, allowing him to live out his life any way he wants in a surprising show of kindness. She opens up to Usiel, the Slayer, and it is then we find out she's not heartless at all, and frequently regrets her cruel little jokes. There's this one time she temporarily disfigures her thrall as punishment, using the lore of transfiguration, and despite appearances of cruelty and indifference, when she is alone and out of sight, she cries her heart out over what she's just done. I guess, like most Fallen, she's just someone who has been deeply hurt by both celestial and human events, and wears a protective mask. I think this is my favorite character, really. Despite her fickle nature, she seems like someone who is fully aware of her strengths and weaknesses. For instance, she knows she can't fight Usiel, who is a bloody angel of death, so she tries to trick him and outrun him every time he finds her, and actually ends up seducing him. When she drops her little act, pretending not to care about anything and being cruel, even the people she's hurt feel pity for her. Next, Harvey Chulo, supposedly a made man, really is a two-bit out-of-shape small-time crook. He owes money he can't pay back, and it's pissing off all the wrong people. One day, the debt collector takes him to a remote location where Harvey becomes fully aware of the fact that he's about to be executed. He begs for his life, reminding his executioner that he has a small daughter, Tina, and he is currently her only parent after his wife died, but the guy isn't having it. Harvey takes a bullet to the head, and as the executioner turns and gets ready to leave, Hasmed, once the throne of the mountain wins, walks the earth once more. He is supposed to pave the way for his master's return, Vodantu of the House of Fates, but he secretly defies his master every chance he gets. Hasmed is fallen, tormented, and doesn't hesitate to betray and devour his so-called ally, Rabadun. Before this, the two occasionally ravage for faith together, torturing and murdering their victims in the process. They also torture and execute someone's son by drilling holes in his kneecaps and healing them repeatedly. Not a good person. Not a good person at all. But despite this, he deeply cares for his daughter, Tina, who awakens the kind, noble protector and warrior within him. Hasmed's story ends quite tragically. The person whose son Hasmed tortures and kills ends up a servant of Vodantu, and the Earthbound decides his newest servant is much better than the old, who needs to be disposed of. Vodantu finds Hasmed and commands him by his true name to kill his own daughter. In a literally unprecedented show of love and will, since this is the only ever canonical instance of someone resisting such a command, Hasmed defies Vodantu once more. Get this, by manifesting so much love that it warps his true name, the only way he can resist murdering his daughter. When the Earthbound commands him into non-existence, however, the Scourge cannot resist and destroys itself, leaving little Tina at the mercy of an Earthbound monster. Next, Sephidor is in the body of one Sam Ashbury, a homeless Vietnam War veteran who's still haunted by nightmares from, well, both wars. and gets by day to day fixing whatever he can wherever he can find work, moving around from church to shelter to homeless camp. He meets Monique and Alexander on the street, two children whose mother dies of a drug overdose before their very eyes, and he sees them put in a group home. When someone shoots up the group home for whatever reason, and Sephidor sees the bullet holes in the headboards of the children's beds, he decides he needs to keep them safe by making them some of his special malefactor devices. Of course, he tricks them into also making pacts with him, presenting himself as their guardian angel. After the children are kidnapped by another fallen, the only way Sephidor can save them is if they renounce him, which they do before his very eyes as he begs them to do it so that he may save them. When he assumes his apocalyptic form and the children realize he's not the angel they hope to see but a demon, they are so disappointed and sad. But without assuming his apocalyptic form, he probably wouldn't have gotten them to renounce him. Of course, the kidnapper is enjoying every bit of their pain, every bit of this whole scene. It's a heartbreaking moment, but things end as well as they can, since the children are saved after they renounce Sephidor. The last thing the character says is, and I quote, "They deserve a real angel, both of them. They're not going to get one. Me, I'm done giving them gifts. But maybe I can at least look out for them in human ways, and maybe that'll be enough. It'll have to be." Yeah, just so you know, some of the stories from the anthology make me cry my heart out because they are beautifully written but very sad, dealing with topics like homelessness, addiction, abuse. But others are full of action and combat, so I guess the final mix has everything it needs. Next, Usiel, the Throne of the Sundered, was there when the Great Debate happened. He spoke against the rebellion, urging everyone to simply leave things as they are and let them unfold as they may. Of those who attended the debate, only he and Layla the Defender remained loyal to the Giver's commands. His lover, Haniel, along with Ingios, the Dominion of the Summer Breezes, and the Angel of the Unseen Light, went to the Giver and asked about the divine plan. They saw, understood, and were seen no more. Though the majority of the Elohim thought that those who had understood the divine plan had been undone by the Giver, Usiel had always believed Haniel still existed, somehow, somewhere. What is most interesting about Usiel in this whole scenario is that he is probably one of the only slayers who confronted the Giver, bringing to her attention that the world seems to change ever so slowly, even in absence of the intervention of Celestials. A well-kept secret was that the slayers didn't actually understand the idea and the purpose of the Second World even as they labored on that project. But when Usiel confronted God about the world seemingly changing by itself, God told him, "Now you start to understand the Second World, as I knew you would. It is not a place, and certainly not your world of death. It is a new era of creation, one that will not be ready for a long time to come. It must be prepared for, though, and your understanding tells me that the time has come for the next day of creation. Thank you, Usiel. You and your house have pleased me." This seems to indicate that everything truly had been foreseen and planned, just like the Council of Fates told Arimal, and beyond this world, a greater destiny awaited humanity and Elohim alike. But the rebellion happened nonetheless, and it was Usiel who actually sent word of it to his lieutenants. Fighting on the side of the loyalists throughout the war, his bloodthirst and bitterness grew so much that he would frequently sacrifice scores of mortals just to end even one of the fallen rebels. And so, when the war ended, he was cast in the pit with a lot of them. Millennia later, he returns to the mortal world in the body of one Clive Keen. What seems to have drawn him to his host is the fact that Clive lost both his daughter and his wife, similar to how Usiel lost his lover, Haniel, an angel of the tides, and this I have to read straight from the second book. Haniel, who longed as much as Usiel to be near the humans, to comfort them and protect them and be loved in return, but who obeyed God's sternest commandment to remain distant, aloof, unseen by mankind. Haniel, who laughed and danced with Usiel and in secret grottos and hidden stretches of beach, played at being human, as did he, a private game they never let others see. Two angels in mortal form, trying to live as humans lived, trying to understand. I love this paragraph. It's both intimate and ludic, and it's ultimately very, very sad. One of my favorites. Anyhow, we've already mentioned Usiel's involvement with Lucifer in a previous episode on the Morning Star, so we won't go into that. But throughout the books, we find Usiel is very respectful to the souls of the dead. He is aided by 3 dead women, 3 wraiths who reside in the same haunt, and he frequently binds souls to some spherical relics he carries with him in the hopes that maybe he'll manage to keep them safe and save them somehow, because that is his duty. Throughout the story, he pretty much tries to kill all the other protagonists, considering them rebel filth, because he still thinks himself somewhat of a loyalist to Heaven's cause. Gaviel barely manages to survive the Slayer, and Sabriel, after being kidnapped by him and taken to the Low Umbra, seems to show her true colors, breaking down and speaking honestly, though she does try to capitalize on his loneliness and reminds him of his late wife, so it might all be a deeper layer of deception. However, they do seem to fall for each other, or at least Usiel seems to fall for her, and she manages to recruit him in the fight against Avitu. Usiel joins for 2 reasons: to drink Avitu's soul and to save Sabriel from Gaviel, who supposedly has her true name. Now, to really spoil everything, let's go to the epilogue. Throughout the books, we discover Gabriel, Hasmed, and Sabriel fought together during the Celestial War. With Usiel on their side, they are ready to take on the Fiend Avitu, once an angel of knowledge, now a monstrous deluded reconciler demoness who seeks to lobotomize the entire world and return mortals to Edenic ignorance. The fierce, quite amazing fight happens in some weird pocket dimension where the Earthbound resides, and the protagonists manage to bind Avitu as Usiel splits her open with his scythe. They all proceed to drink parts of her memory, and this I have to read to you. Sabriel took the knowledge of storms, fighting Hasmed for pieces of it, but it was hers by right, the movement of water through wind and wind upon water. She took it along with sensations of 1,000 years of bringing nourishing rain for generations of worshippers. Gaviel sought the command of stone, greedily sucking in the right to shake the earth and form it to his will, as Avitu had to shield her tribe and smite her enemies. Hasmed absorbed her skills with the flesh of men, the power that had saved countless infants through rude births, that had blessed her people with health through harsh winters, that had swept their rivals aside with reeking plague. And Usiel, he took her feelings for humanity, her ability to look through their eyes and follow their movements and feel their sensations. With it came her horror at short years of grinding toil and fear and mortality, her despair, the helpless empathy that led her to declare war on consciousness, that led her to think men would be better off as mere beasts. So, after devouring her memories, they reach her core, her true self, completely stripped of thousands of years of torment, the purest part of everything Avitu was and had ever been. And in that moment, cruel, heartless Sabriel tries to stop the others from devouring that part. Gaviel does it out of pride, drinking deep of she who had bested him before, who had taken the power and the privilege he craved. Usiel, bloodthirsty Usiel, couldn't resist. He just couldn't stop, though he knew it was wrong and cruel. Hasmed and Sabriel stopped, withdrew, and left that realm, returning to the physical one immediately. In the epilogue, we see Hasmed trying to protect his beloved daughter Tina and being destroyed by Vodantu. We see Gaviel rising from the earth, from his refuge of stone, ready to rule and probably abuse humanity, enjoying the power he gained from Avitu as well as her torment. Usiel becomes a bloodthirsty death god, demanding sacrifices and encouraging his cult to go to war. And Sabriel reveals her deception to her thrall. Surprisingly, she releases him from his pact, and she's off to enjoy her riches and freedom, at least until a new Earthbound comes along demanding servitude of fallen and mortals alike. To conclude, as you can see, the characters are multifaceted and very interesting with both virtues and sins, each telling the story of a distinct type of pain and trauma. Throughout the books, some are destroyed, some rediscover at least a sliver of their former glory, and others are consumed by their torment or another's torment and turned into monsters. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.